You don't wake up in ancient Egypt. You regain consciousness, sprawled on a mat of woven reeds, tongue dry as old papyrus, and your jaw already aching. Not from talking, from chewing or trying to. Because here, bread is not food. Bread is penance. It's early. The sky's still cool, a dusty mauve before the sun roars back to life. You blink crust from your eyes and grab the day's first meal, a brick-shaped lump of wheat and regret. This is the staple, the gift of the Nile, the sacred sustenance of kings and slaves alike, and it's about to betray you. You bite down. Immediately, there's resistance, not the satisfying crunch of toast, but the malicious grind of sand between your teeth. It's like gnawing on a mummy's knuckles. You wince, your molars crackle, you swear the bread just chipped back, because what no one told you is, this daily bread is full of rocks, not intentionally. But in ancient Egypt, grain was ground between two flat stones, the saddle quern. Efficient? Yes. Gentle? Not at all. Over time, tiny shards of quartz and limestone would flake off into the flour. By the time you're forming that dough and slapping it into the fire-heated mold, it's already loaded with more grit than a desert windstorm. Think crunchy toast, but it's your skull doing the crumbling. And there's no choice. This is not artisanal sourdough. It's emmer wheat, tough as camel hide, mashed into loaves so dense they could be used as currency, or weapons, or dental torture devices. The priests praise it, the scribes record it, the pharaohs are buried with it, but none of them actually chew it. That joy is reserved for people like you. Let's not romanticize this. You work in a workshop. Maybe you're a servant. Maybe you're an artisan, making little amulets shaped like beetles while your stomach begs for mercy. Your teeth? Already worn flat from years of grinding gravel disguised as food. You've seen elders with mouths like broken tombs, gums raw, molars splintered, abscesses ballooning like cursed grapes. They don't eat bread. They gargle it and hope it dissolves. The wealthy? They're no better off. They get fancier loaves, some with honey or dates. But the sand? The sand is eternal. Even the mummified corpses of nobility have been found with mouths full of dental disasters, teeth worn down to the pulp, infections rotted straight into the jawbone. Imagine dying of a toothache, then being embalmed with the very bread that murdered you. Welcome to the breadocalypse. Of course, they didn't know better. They didn't have filters or fine milled flour or soft yeast-risen buns. They had rocks, fire, and starvation. Bread was life, and pain, and paradox. Even children chewed on it. You watch a 5-year-old gnaw a hunk of barley loaf like a dog on a bone. There's no joy in it, just instinct, survival, and a slow, inevitable journey to gum disease. And this is breakfast. No jam, no butter, maybe some garlic if you're lucky, maybe a splash of beer, thick, warm, yeasty beer. We'll get to that, to help wash it down. But mostly, it's bread and regret, sand and saliva. You glance at your neighbor. He's older, smiling with toothless gums. You'll get used to it, he says, then spits blood into the dirt. There's a saying in this village. A full belly and a cracked tooth is still a gift from the gods. You're not sure if it's meant to be comforting or just true. By midday, the sun scorches the sand. You keep chewing, not because you're hungry, but because there's still bread left. You don't waste food, not here. Not when the Nile floods are late and granaries are guarded like gold vaults. Not when famine is a yearly threat and priests declare that spoiled grain is divine punishment. Sometimes you dream of soft bread, of spongy dough and warm butter, but dreams don't fill stomachs. And your bread? It's more reliable than love, harder than loyalty, older than your ancestors. The dead are buried with it. You will be too. And still, every morning, you'll wake up, spit dust, crack a molar, and give thanks. Because you're still alive, still chewing, still tasting that sacred blend of wheat, ash, and despair. In Egypt, that counts as winning. You start the day not with coffee, not with tea, but with something that looks like a mudslide and smells like a bakery's back alley after a heat wave. The Egyptians call it HQT. You will call it survival in a bowl. Picture it, a slurry the color of camel spit, thick enough to stand a reed straw upright. It's equal parts mashed barley bread, Nile water, wild yeast, and whatever airborne bacteria drifted through the open courtyard last night. The brew has been bubbling in a clay jar since before dawn, its surface fizzing like a cauldron of flatulence and faith. There is no chill here. Refrigeration is a sorcery 2 millennia away. So every swallow arrives warm, vaguely sour, sprinkled with floating breadcrumbs and the occasional gnat that got tipsy and drowned. You hesitate? Bad idea. Water alone is suicide. The river teems with parasites that make your intestines sing madrigals of pain. Beer, however, is boiled, and anything that survives that heat has clearly earned residence in your gut. Besides, the priests swear the goddess Tenenet blesses this brew. Translation: drink or die. You lift the clay cup. The rim is chipped, gritty against your lips. First sip, lukewarm gravy, foamy as a draft horse's sweat, tasting faintly of soured honey and damp straw. Second sip, sourness deepens, the barley grit rasps your throat. By the third, you stop tasting and start floating. Because although the alcohol is mild, you haven't eaten since yesterday's rock loaf dinner, and low blood sugar makes every bubble feel like prophecy. Now the magic happens. Your body registers calories, dense, liquid bread sliding southward, heavy as wet sand. B vitamins? Check. Protein flecks from pulverized yeast? Check. A whole microzoo of lactobacillus turning your bowels into a fermentation tank? Double check. Within minutes, you're warm, dizzy, and vaguely optimistic, like a toddler who's licked every spoon in the kitchen. Work crews love this feeling. It dulls back pain and blunts the knowledge that you're about to haul limestone blocks the size of hippos across sizzling sand. Foremen distribute beer rations twice more before sunset, each jar cloudier than the last. No one complains. They'd rather burp barley than cough river water worms. Yet every cup carries a gamble. Leave the mash too long and it erupts into vinegar. Drink too early and the yeast still chomps starch, inflating your belly like a goatskin bellows. Some mornings you swear the brew is still alive inside you, gurgling, foaming, releasing little belches of grainy air that burn like incense gone wrong. The phrase liquid bread stops being poetic. It's anatomical. You glance at your neighbor, thin wrists, bloated middle, eyes bright with slight inebriation. Good batch, he mumbles, wiping foam from his beard. You nod, even though your stomach is already staging an opera. The bubbles climb your throat, threaten to exit in whichever direction is fastest. You suppress a burp the size of a minor deity and blame the rising sun for your watery eyes. At the Royal Brewery, the recipe is polished. Malted emmer, lightly roasted, mashed with date syrup for sweetness. In theory, nobility sips a cleaner brew. In practice, grain dust still drifts off the grindstones, bugs still dive-bomb the vats, and servants still skim dead beetles with reeds. Even Pharaoh's cup carries the whisper of sand, and the lurking fear of mycotoxins that can twist visions into nightmares. Maybe that explains the divine dreams engraved on temple walls. Maybe the gods were just yeast hallucinations served at breakfast. But complain? Never. Beer is wages. Beer is medicine. Beer is the reason your children aren't skeletons. Scribal records list daily quotas. 4 jars for men, 2 for women, 1 for kids. A pyramid's workforce can drain a small lake of the stuff in a single season. And when harvest fails, grain goes first to the breweries. It's easier to pacify the hungry with tepid euphoria than with sermons. By noon, the sun bleaches the sky bone white, and the slurry in your gut thickens. Your belly sloshes like a clay jar half full of porridge. You exhale barley fumes as you heave rope, carve stone, chase goats, whatever task Pharaoh's grand design demands. You're both nourished and narcotized, existing in that soft buzz where hunger is memory and future pain is tomorrow's priestly problem. Some nights, under a crescent moon, you see elders stagger home, bellies taut and smiles loose, singing hymns older than the pyramids themselves. They'll wake before dawn with throbbing heads, mouths like mildewed baskets, and reach straight for another bowl of liquid salvation. The cycle is as eternal as Osiris. Drink, toil, ache, repeat. And you? You will join them. Because this mushy, frothing concoction, half food, half fever dream, is the only thing standing between you and the coffin of dehydration. So raise your jar, let the flies land where they may. Swallow the warmth, the grit, the faint taste of river mud. Feel the yeast hum inside you like a distant drum. Tomorrow, when someone in the 21st century complains their latte isn't foamy enough, remember this moment. You, in linen rags, sipping bacterial oatmeal under a sun that hasn't yet learned mercy. And give thanks for the burp that keeps you alive, the buzz that keeps you moving, and the knowledge that, in ancient Egypt, lukewarm beer was mercy disguised as breakfast. High noon. The sun slams the work camp like a kiln lid, and the air above the sand wobbles in a feverish mirage. Your stomach, already sloshing with barley beer, decides to audition as a percussion instrument. It's lunch, if you can call it that, and the overseer's shadow stretches long enough to remind every spine in the quarry who owns the next breath. Downwind, cauldrons the size of sarcophagi burble over camel dung fires. Workers crowd around with chipped bowls, hopeful eyes, and the resigned patience of people who know hunger better than they know their own birthdays. Today's menu never changes. Bean, onion, garlic stew, seasoned with desperation. If branding existed, that would be etched on every pot. You shuffle forward. The stew's aroma punches first. Sharp garlic that prickles your nose hairs, sweet onion that promises comfort, and the unmistakable undertone of something earthy. Is that goat? Rat? Yesterday's sandals? You'll never know. The pot has boiled since dawn, absorbing anything the cooks could coax from the storehouse. Fava beans smashed to mush, lentils for body, leek tops because nothing is wasted, a hint of coriander if the stars were generous. Most of all, salt, enough to wrinkle your tongue like cured leather, because Pharaoh's granaries hoard salt as currency, but sweat steals it faster than overseers steal dignity. The ladle dips. Thick brown sludge glops into your bowl, splattering your forearm. It's hot, scalding actually, but you don't flinch. Pain is old news. Heat means fewer live parasites. You spot one pale lima bean floating like an eye. Luxurious. Somewhere near the bottom lurks a surprise. A goat knuckle, or maybe a shard of ox bone nobody bothered to pick out. Protein is protein. First mouthful, the paste coats your teeth, settles into every crack left by the breadocalypse. Grit grinds under your molars, sand again, always sand, and a rogue coriander seed detonates fragrant bitterness on your palate. Second mouthful, onion sweetness, quickly chased by garlic so raw it could file your nails. Third, a burst of salt that makes your lips sting, followed by a tiny pebble that nearly snaps a premolar. You spit it discreetly. The ground is already gravel-speckled with last week's dental casualties. Around you, the stew transforms the camp into a symphony of slurps and muffled curses. Steam fogs the air, mingling with sweat vapor and dust until breathing feels like inhaling warm porridge. Someone laughs, a short barking sound cut off by an overseer's glare. Across the fire trench, a young boy too small for quarry work but too hungry for childhood scrapes his bowl with a shard of bread, chasing every smear of bean paste. He hasn't earned a second ladle yet. Hierarchy here is carved in stone, just like the temple blocks you'll haul after the break. Water? Forget it. The same beer porridge you downed at dawn now serves as chaser. You pour a splash over the stew to thin the concrete into something drinkable. Bubbles rise, carrying boiled garlic perfume straight into your sinuses. You swallow. The mixture lands in your gut with the grace of a collapsing wall. Immediately the fermentation resumes, gassy as a desert thunderstorm. By afternoon, you and every co-laborer will march back to the quarry, bellies ballooned, releasing barley garlic harmonies timed to each footfall. Pharaoh's choir, someone once joked. The overseer whipped him until he sang a quieter tune. But make no mistake, this sludge keeps temples climbing skyward. Beans for bulk protein, onions and garlic for electrolytes and flavor, coriander and cumin to half-mask rot. It's cheap sustenance that sticks to ribs and wage sheets alike. Records on Ostraca list rations by the kilo. 11 liters of grain per man per week, 2 onions per day, a fistful of beans. Miss a quota and you don't just go hungry, you risk revolt. More than once, gangs of tomb builders have thrown down chisels and walked off-site because the garlic deliveries were late. Civilizations may fall for want of gold. But Egypt? Egypt teeters on the edge of a missing bulb of allium sativum. Occasionally, a festival brightens the cauldron. A sacrificial goat yields fist-sized chunks of meat, bobbing like miracles. The smell alone makes grown men tear up, salt meeting sinew, fat releasing smoky halos. Those rare bites remind you that joy can be chewed, that flavor once existed outside of salty mud with garlic. They also remind you you're expendable. The priests get the kidneys, the overseers the haunch, you, cartilage and boiled hooves if luck smiles. And still, the stew is community. Nights when the moon paints the dunes silver, pots stay on embers till dawn, thickening into a crust the workers call scarab skin. You gather around the fire, scraping charred edges with bits of flatbread, telling stories your ancestors swore never to repeat. For a moment, the overseers fade, the whips rest, and all that matters is the shared warmth of a meal that tastes like survival itself. Fast forward a few thousand years, someone microwaves a canned bean soup, reads the sodium warning, and complains on social media. Remember them. Remember you, barefooted in linen wraparounds, teeth sanded down, swallowing another spoon of garlic bean cement while the sun brands your scalp. Gratitude isn't a hashtag here, it's the aftertaste of not dying on an empty stomach. You look at the bottom of your bowl, streaks of brown, a single onion strand, and a chip of rock. You lick the last smear, it's gritty, but it's calories, and hand the bowl back. The overseer's shadow points toward the rising columns of the temple. Break is over, the block waits. Your arms tighten around the wooden sledge rope, heavy with salt, beans, and the unspoken knowledge that tomorrow's stew will taste exactly the same. Yet, as your muscles strain, you whisper a quiet thanks to the pot that kept you standing. Slave stew may not lift curses, but it lifts limestone. And in ancient Egypt, that's enough to tilt eternity. Step out of the quarry dust and into the palace breeze, and you'd swear you just crossed into another dimension. One perfumed by imported resin and cooled by palm frond fans the size of ostrich wings. A scribe guides you across polished limestone, past lotus pillar colonnades, and suddenly you're staring at a dining hall longer than the Nile is merciful. Linen curtains billow, singing girls sprinkle petals, bronze braziers glow with fragrant myrrh. Somewhere, a harp sighs the kind of notes that make gods lean closer. Your stomach, still heavy with garlic bean paste, tries to shrink in shame. Because here comes the pharaoh's dinner parade, an endless procession of gilded platters, dazzling enough to blind a scarab. Roast goose lacquered in honey, sides of antelope shimmering with fat, baskets of figs so ripe their skins burst like embarrassed cheeks, jugs of red wine from distant oases, bowls of pomegranate seeds floating in lotus syrup, freshwater mullet glazed with date molasses and dusted with coriander pollen. It looks like heaven, smells like seduction, and, if you're unlucky, kills like a curse. You won't be eating any of it, of course. You're merely observing, an invisible errand runner, summoned to carry records, clean spills, fetch another dab of myrrh. But watch closely. Even the king approaches his banquet the way a priest approaches a crocodile. Because beneath the shimmering fat and syrup lies a truth whispered in corridors and carved, discreetly, onto ostraca. The pharaoh's table is a minefield. Start with the meat. Those geese began their day swimming in temple ponds, pampered with barley mash, too plump to flap away. Yet by sunset, after a 4-hour journey under a punishing sun, every carcass hums with bacterial ambition. No ice, no refrigeration, just warm linen and prayer. Cooks baste, spice, and sear until the skin crackles. But Clostridium is a stubborn court jester, silent, invisible, waiting to host its own feast inside royal intestines. Then, the fish, captured at dawn, glistening under the palace awnings by noon, already flirting with putrefaction by dusk. The Nile teems with barbel and tilapia, yes, but also with fly eggs that hatch faster than a rumor. One wrong slice and a wriggling surprise greets the royal palate. The aroma of coriander and fenugreek can only disguise so much necrosis. Even the fruit conspires. Figs arrive nestled in reed baskets, jeweled with crystallized sugar, but tiny wasp larvae often hitchhike inside. Dates ferment in their own sweetness, birthing clouds of yeast that turn syrup to vinegar. A noble could bite into luxury and chomp straight through a squirming inheritance. Pharaoh knows this. That's why tasters exist. Muscular men with stoic eyes who sample every dish moments before it reaches the golden throne. They chew, swallow, and stand back, sweaty hands on bloated stomachs, waiting to learn if the gods favor longevity today. Some nights end quietly, with deep bows and whispers of gratitude. Other nights end with a taster collapsing like a felled obelisk, lips foaming while priests sprint for antidotes of honey and ground charcoal. When that happens, the entire course is hurled to stray dogs, or into the Nile, for crocodiles to finish the autopsy. But danger doesn't deter spectacle, it fuels it. Pharaoh's power glitters brightest against the backdrop of possible doom. Every bite he takes is a public cliff dive, an act of edible bravado. I trust my cooks, my gods, my luck. Watch me swallow the empire and live. Courtiers applaud, partly thrilled, partly terrified their own platter might harbor the next microscopic assassin. You see it in their eyes, the high priest nibbling lotus root while silently rehearsing funeral rites, the general spearing an olive, jaw muscles locked like shield walls, the queen dabbing her lips with perfumed linen, heart racing behind lapis jewelry. Seated near the end of the table, minor nobles exchange glances, calculating whether the second slice of honey duck is worth an overnight body ache that feels like a jackal gnawing your ribs. And what of the slaves who prepared it all? They've licked nothing but steam. They know which basket hid sour figs, which goose leaked suspicious juices, which amphora cracked a week ago and now smells faintly of tomb air. Their whispers travel faster than palace gossip. Platters 3 and 6. Hold your breath. But even they can't predict everything. A scorpion might sneak into the dates, mold might bloom on the bread's underside. A single mismeasured pinch of blue lotus could tip a wine jug from euphoric to hallucinogenic. Royalty feasts at the edge of a cliff, and the kitchen crew tightrope walks beside them, unpaid acrobats of hygiene. Late into the night, you witness the final act. Golden trays removed, dancers dismissed, braziers dimming. Pharaoh reclines, flushed with wine and triumph, while scribes tally leftovers for temple offerings. The tasters, pale but upright, exhale relief. But already your runner's ears catch soft groans echoing down marble corridors. Someone, somewhere, losing that gamble with botulism or bile. You're dismissed, free to trudge back through servant passages smelling of boiled onions and sweat. As you exit, the throne room fades behind a veiled screen, and you remember your quarry lunch with an unexpected pang of gratitude. Garlic bean sludge may grind teeth, but it rarely kills outright. Tomorrow you'll wake under a sky no less cruel, but at least your bowl won't play roulette with scorpion tails and salmonella. Back in the workers' village, a sliver of moon rides low over mud brick roofs. You taste stale beer on your breath and dust on your lips. Somewhere beyond the dark dunes, the palace lamps still flicker, tiny, trembling stars around a god-king who just swallowed the night's final risk. You spit a pebble, grin at the absurdity, and curl onto your reed mat, thankful for a meal humble enough to be merely unpleasant. In ancient Egypt, the safest seat at Pharaoh's banquet is the one a mile away, holding a wooden bowl of bean paste, and living to complain about it. Dawn over the Nile should be poetic, mist curling like silk, ibis wings slicing rose gold air. Instead, your nose meets a wall of rot so solid it deserves its own cartouche. Welcome to Riverfront Breakfast, where yesterday's catch is already conspiring against you. You stand on a narrow, slimy jetty, toes squishing through silt that feels suspiciously warm. Fishermen haul wicker traps bursting with barbel and tilapia, scales flashing like coins in a beggar's dream. Sounds glorious, until the traps hit deck and every fish starts dying at precisely the speed of sunrise. No ice, no shade, just scorching oxygen and the promise of rapid decomposition. In minutes, their gills stop fluttering. In an hour, their eyes glaze. By noon, their bellies bloat like little papyrus balloons filled with doom. Flies arrive first, black, buzzing phantoms drawn to moisture and misery. They swarm so thick you can't tell where fish ends and insect begins. One lands on your lower lip. You swat it, taste Nile mud, consider vomiting. But retching is for nobles. You've work to do, gutting, splitting, salting, racing an invisible clock that ticks loudly in the back of your skull. If you lose, you won't need an undertaker. The fish will bury you from the inside. Knife in hand, you slice open a tilapia. Warm entrails flop onto a reed mat, already buzzing with larvae no bigger than grains of sand. That's right, the eggs were laid while the fish still flopped. You could swear the maggots wag hello. You sprinkle salt by the fistful, hoping to kill what eyes can't track. The salt stings your cracked fingertips. You keep sprinkling. Somewhere behind you, a vendor sings about fresh river flavors, with a straight face equal parts courage and denial. Next step, sun drying. You lay fillets on rush racks, angling them toward a breeze that smells like hot marsh gas and donkey sweat. The flesh forms a skin within minutes, turning translucent, almost pretty, if you ignore the speckled black dots that are flies laying round too. Cowtail switches wave nonstop to shoo them, but the flies always return, persistent as taxes. You accept that each strip of fish now contains one secret ingredient: insect eggs, protein-rich, impossible to bill the customer for, always complimentary. Don't fancy maggot sprinkles? Too bad. Even Pharaoh's kitchens can't escape the life cycle of musca domestica. They simply spice heavier: fenugreek, dill, coriander pollen, aromatic smoke to mask the tang of incubation. Some cooks swear a quick dip in date vinegar purges larvae. Others trust smokehouses. Low fires of acacia wood that steep fillets in a haze so thick, your lungs smell like barbecue for days. You try both. Neither erases the memory of that first wriggle on your tongue. Sometimes the river gifts something worse. Mullet roe, prized, expensive, and lethal when spoiled. Stored in earthen jars sealed with mud, it can ferment into a toxin potent enough to paralyze a priest mid-prayer. Rumor says a high official once collapsed, face first, into a platter of the stuff, eyes crossed, foam fizzing. The jars were smashed, the cook exiled, the flies unimpressed. They just relocated to the next free buffet. Meanwhile, crocodiles patrol the shallows, indifferent custodians of sanitation. Every so often, a careless fisherman tumbles in, and the crocs enjoy their own version of surf and turf. Locals shrug, fewer mouths to feed. You keep your distance, but sometimes a fish rack tips, slabs sliding into brown water. Retrieve them? Risk losing arms? Depends on how hungry the overseer is and how replaceable you are. By midday, the sun brands your scalp through linen. The drying racks reek of brine and decay. You sip warm beer to quiet the nausea, feel bubbles race past yesterday's garlic stew, wonder if guts can revolt by submitting petitions. Sweat rivers down your back, picks up fish oil, and turns you into a walking sardine torch. Flies follow. Always flies. At market twilight, you haul baskets of semi-dried fillets inland. Each step releases little puffs of ammonia. Traders haggle in rapid-fire insults. This stinks like your mother's tomb. At least my fish still has flesh, not memories. You settle for half the copper you hoped, knowing tomorrow the same fish, if unsold, will be soaked, resalted, respiced, and rebranded as aged delicacy. Consumer protection equals buyer beware or buyer boil. Night falls. You wash knives in river shallows glowing with moonlit algae, perhaps sneaking a rinse yourself. Bad idea. Bilharzia worms slip through skin like gossip through temple walls. You splash out, scratching shins, hoping the goddess Sekhmet is taking vaccination requests. On shore, a cat, sacred, smug, nibbles discarded fish heads, purrs at the maggots, and trots off glowing with divine endorsement. Back in the worker huts, you choke down a supper of your own product. Thin fish gruel, smoky, salty, strangely crunchy. You decide not to investigate the crunch. Behind you, a neighbor yanks a wriggling larva from his portion, flicks it into the darkness, mutters, "Extra meat," and keeps eating. You both laugh, because humor is cheaper than being upset and less risky than going hungry. Before sleep, you stare at the black river ribbon, glistening under stars that don't smell a thing. Somewhere a noble complains the mullet roe tastes too earthy. Somewhere the crocodiles burp secrets back to the tide, and in your mouth a phantom taste lingers. Fish oil, salt, the faint tang of survival. You spit. A fly lands on the fleck before it hits sand. Tomorrow, the sun will rise, fish will rot, and you will slice faster, salt harder, pray louder. Because on the Nile the water gives and the water robs, but the flies? They just keep score, tiny buzzing accountants of decay, always ready to audit your next meal. In ancient Egypt, fresh fish is a myth, maggots are garnish, and the nose is a liar that the stomach learns to forgive. Daybreak, and the sky over Memphis still looks half asleep, soft lavender smudged with chimney smoke. But the temple complex already hums like a beehive stuffed with brass. You're here on delivery duty, balancing a reed basket of grain on one shoulder, anemic ribs on the other, while two guards in feathered skirts decide whether your face merits eye contact. Spoiler, it doesn't. Still, they wave you through. Offerings wait for no one, especially not someone who counts calories by the pebble. Inside, incense punches your nostrils with a cinnamon myrrh uppercut. Stone corridors swallow sound. Each footstep echoes like a drum roll for eternity. Statues line the walls, hawks, cows, jackals, glinting in torchlight, lips carved in eternal appetite. You know the drill. The gods must eat first, not figuratively, literally, or so the priests claim with voices syrup-thick from well-fed throats. The sanctum door yawns open. A choir of young acolytes chants vowels older than dust, while senior priests arrange a breakfast buffet that would make Pharaoh's steward cry jealous tears. Fresh emmer loaves still steaming, whole geese lacquered in date honey, bowls of lotus pollen custard, towers of beer jars sweating in the heat. And at the center, a golden plate piled with prime cuts of beef, meat so rare outside temple walls, you'd trade a year of wages for one greasy bite. The slaughterhouse smell, iron, smoke, a hint of bile, makes your empty stomach knot like a fisher's net. But you keep moving, because drooling on sacred food is punishable by more than a stern lecture. You set your grain basket beside 30 identical twins, each tagged with a tiny ceramic docket. From Field 12A, South Floodplain, for the glory of Amun. That field once belonged to your uncle's village. It was annexed last flood season when a visiting oracle declared the soil radiant with divine potential. Translation: the temple wanted the barley. The oracle's trance conveniently ended the moment the deed was clay-sealed. A gong booms. Showtime. Junior clerics lift platters and advance toward the inner shrine, a curtain-shrouded chamber where mortals rarely tread. You catch only glimpses, a flash of gold leaf, a ripple of linen, the brief silhouette of a granite god with a grin carved halfway to cosmic indifference. The food disappears behind the curtain. Ritual words rumble. Flaming torches hiss. Somewhere beyond, divine jaws allegedly chomp away. Never mind that stone molars can't chew and basalt stomachs don't know hunger. 15 minutes later, the curtain parts. The same platters emerge, noticeably lighter, but nowhere near empty. Because, surprise, the gods have consumed the essence, leaving behind perfectly edible leftovers that are now, by sacred tradition, temple property. Priests escort the half-eaten bounty to a side hall, where it's redistributed with bureaucratic precision. Portion for the high priest, portion for scribes, portion for guards. You, the serf who hauled the grain. At best, you'll lick the ladle after the guard's dog is finished. Outside the temple gates, the world tilts differently. Villagers queue at a communal oven praying their monthly flour rations last another week. Children chase rats in alley gutters for dinner prospects. Last drought, a mother smuggled temple refuse, spoiled goose fat, under her shawl. She was caught, whipped, and sent home with bones too rancid even for dogs. She buried them anyway, hoping the smell wouldn't wake the neighbor's hunger. You're not surprised. Everyone knows the numbers whispered during beer breaks. Temples control a third of the kingdom's fertile land, diverting grain yields into treasure rooms that smell like rodent paradise. During surplus years, priests trade barley for lapis and cedar. During famine, they lend grain back to the crown, with interest paid in yet more land deeds. It's a spiritual industrial complex tall enough to cast a shadow over Pharaoh himself. But challenge it? The gods' bellies are your insurance for the afterlife. Deny them now, and you spend eternity chewing sand in a coffin half-digested by beetles. So, you watch the offerings flow like the Nile in flood, cattle lines stretching past the pylons, baskets of figs toted by sweating porters, amphorae of wine so fragrant the air tastes purple. You watch priests grow soft-bellied, gold-collared, while workers shrink into their linen like drying reeds. And still, everyone nods along with the hymn. The gods are generous. Late afternoon, you're dispatched to clean vessels in a courtyard ringed by sycamore shade. The washwater turns pink with roasted goose grease. A priest strolls by, picks meat from his teeth with a bronze pin, and thanks you for your pious service. You bow, fist over heart, hide the flicker of envy. When he's gone, you swipe a stray lotus seed off a platter rim, pop it into your mouth. Sweet, crunchy, a stolen miracle. Your first sin tastes like heaven after months of grit and garlic. Sunset paints the pylons blood orange. Temple bells toll vespers. Hundreds of citizens gather outside the gates, lifting hands, chanting for divine mercy. Floods to rise, crops to grow, babies to survive the night. Behind you, in torchlit storerooms, sacks of barley tower higher than a scribe's optimism. Rats dance atop them, fat and fearless. You can't decide who you envy more, the rodents gorging on royal grain, or the gods immune to indigestion. When darkness finally uncurls across the courtyards, you stagger home, pockets empty, soul buzzing with equal parts bitterness and awe. On your reed mat, you nibble a heel of yesterday's stone bread, chase it with lukewarm beer, and exhale a prayer you're not sure counts. May tomorrow's offering be lighter. May my bowl be heavier. May the gods not notice if a single fig goes missing. Somewhere overhead, stars flicker like silver grains poured into a black jar. You close gritty eyes, imagine them as loaves, and dream of a sky that finally feeds back. For now, the temples eat first, the people eat last, and the gods, they never wash their own dishes. Night in the Delta can fool you. Cool breeze off the marshes, frogs rehearsing love songs, moonlight rinsing the reeds silver. You might almost believe tomorrow will be gentle. Then a cow lows somewhere behind the date palms, hollow, urgent, and you remember why dawn terrifies every dairyman from Elephantine to the Mediterranean. Fresh milk waits for no one, and mercy waits for fresh milk. Picture the scene just before sunrise. You trudge toward a mud brick byre, lantern sputtering, sandals squelching through manure the texture of hot cake batter. The air inside is swamp-thick with ammonia and wet fur. A heifer flicks her tail, painting your shin with aromatic gratitude. You mutter a blessing to Hathor, goddess of both love and cattle, then crouch beside an udder that feels warmer than your own blood. The first squirts hit a clay bowl, steaming, frothy, smelling faintly of cut grass wrapped in animal breath. For 5 heartbeats it is perfect, bottled moonlight, liquid lullaby. But the Nile Valley wakes angry and hot. Within minutes the bowl's surface bronzes, skinning over with a film you could peel like damp parchment. Within an hour, under a rising sun, invisible armies of microbes galaxy burst through every drop, turning sugar to acid, promise to peril. You hustle home, bowl balanced, praying a pothole won't baptize the street in lactose. At your doorway, you pass a jug of beer fermenting happily. It can bubble all day. Milk, on the other hand, is a diva with a dagger. If you don't drink or cook it by breakfast, it'll curdle into a sour sludge sharp enough to shave tongues. Children get first pour. Their small bellies still gamble on diarrhea because calcium grows bones faster than curses grow teeth. You watch them gulp, mustaches forming like chalk smears, and you envy their ignorance. Adults think twice, especially you, whose guts already host yesterday's fish-fly maggot tango. Still, you tip the bowl, swallow, feel warmth bloom down your throat. Sweet, grassy, alive. Also ticking like a crocodile egg. But you have a backup plan. Turn disaster into cheese. Forget wheels of buttery cheddar. Egyptian cheese is more existential threat than picnic treat. You heat leftover milk in a pot blackened by bean stew memories, add a spoon of sour from yesterday's batch, stir until white flakes clot like tiny cloud shrapnel, strain through linen so threadbare it whistles when the wind hits. The curds slump into a squat lump you pat into a palm-sized patty. That's it. No aging cellar, no wax rind, no monks humming over wooden shelves. What you've made the priests politely dub milk fruit. Everyone else just calls it goat soap. Take a bite. The texture is crumbly chalk veined with unexpected squeaks. Tastes like someone pickled grass, sprinkled foot sweat, then dared you to smile. If you're lucky, the salt you kneaded in yesterday keeps it merely sour. If you're unlucky, green freckles bloom by dusk, announcing a mold that my modern descendant will one day honor as penicillium, but that, right now, will line your intestines with regret. Storage? You wrap the patty in palm fibers, hang it from a ceiling hook where cats can't reach, though they try, acrobats powered by sacrilege. Heat rises, fat melts, droplets fall, staining the floor with little constellations of grease. You sniff, still edible? Maybe. Probably. Flip a scarab, that's your expiration code. Wealthier households claim better methods. They smoke curds over acacia chips until they harden into beige stones that could double as sling ammo. Travelers tuck these in satchels, suck them like sour jawbreakers while trudging desert roads. Soldiers chew them for salt, then spit chalky shards like tiny catapults at boredom. When they hit water, a rare miracle, the pebbles blossom back into clumps you can mash into porridge. Flavor? Imagine a goat whispering insults through a leather funnel into your sinuses. Yet in temple kitchens, dairy plays a different game. Priests mix spoiled milk with honey and crushed dates, then market the potion as a cosmetic for elite women. Nectar of Hathor, guaranteed to smooth wrinkles. It does smooth something. After 3 days on the shelf, the brew separates into a top layer that reeks like corpse lilies and a bottom sludge that could strip paint off a sarcophagus. The noble ladies slather it on anyway, trusting divinity over biochemistry. Occasionally, milk chooses violence faster than you can curdle it. You've seen barbers apply warm cow milk to soothe razor burns. 30 minutes later, the client's neck blooms red welts, swelling like angry figs. You've watched shepherds pour stale goat milk onto ulcerated camel legs. The wounds foam, smell of butyric nightmares, attract flies in black veils. Some call it healing. Some call it hosting the goddess Sekhmet in microbial form. You just call it a reminder that dairy is a double-edged ladle. Even so, the gamble never ends. Mid-afternoon, sun hammering doors shut, you crave a cool sip. You unhook the hanging curd, pry off a crumb, Pop it between molars already eroded by bread sand. Salty zing sparks your tongue, followed by a tang that puckers the back of your skull. Good sign. Still alive. You nibble more, heart-drumming hillside warnings. Each bite is a pact, calories in exchange for digestive Russian roulette. The odds? Better than river water, worse than roasted barley. Acceptable, in other words. Night returns. Frogs encore. You set tomorrow's bowl under the cow, stroke her flank, whisper thanks for the risk you'll swallow at dawn. She flicks her tail, baptizes your shoulder again. You laugh, because irony in ancient Egypt is wet, warm, and slightly grassy. Across the village, someone retches. Maybe their cheese told a lie they believed, but your belly, for now, feels merely adventurous. You stretch on your reed mat, watch stars quiver like droplets of milk you'll never keep fresh. Somewhere above them, the eternal cow goddess Nut arches across the sky, nursing the sun for its rebirth. Even divinity can't churn milk without spoilage. She simply swallows the rot and births light anyway. So tomorrow you'll gamble again. Milk in a bowl, life in a bite, hope curdled into courage. Because here on the Nile, dairy is less a food group than a daily dare whispered by warm udders and answered by stubborn stomachs. In ancient Egypt, you don't consume milk. You negotiate a ceasefire with decay, and every cheese is a tiny white treaty about to be broken. You wake before the sun, but the smell wakes first. It slithers through the doorway of your mud brick kitchen, curls around your nostrils, and settles in behind your eyes like a headache with hooves. Goat fat, fresh rendered, still warm, stubborn as gossip. By noon, it will be in your hair, your linen wrap, the cracks of your fingernails, and the dreams of anyone who stands downwind. The culprit squats in the courtyard, a squat clay cauldron half filled with yesterday's trimmings, goat skin, a constellation of white fat nodules, and enough connective tissue to knit a funeral shroud. Firewood is scarce, so you've been feeding the flames with dried dung patties that smolder slow and sour. As the fat melts, it pops like beetles in a bonfire, spattering your arms with tiny blisters that already smell like tomorrow's dinner. Why goat fat? Because olive oil is for priests, sesame oil for traders, and butter for the very short winter when butter pretends it won't rot by lunchtime. Animal fat is the affordable all-purpose solution: lamp fuel, skin ointment, frying medium, even hair pomade if you're feeling fashionable and reckless. Written lists of household stores mention fat jars right next to beer jars and flour bins, necessities lined up like reluctant soldiers. You skim off the clear tallow into a jug the color of desert sunrise. Steam rises, carrying notes of scorched barnyard and caramelized marrow. It clings to the walls, the ceiling, your eyelashes. Take one step outside and you trail an olfactory banner that proclaims, "Breakfast is rendered mammal." Next task, frying onions for midday stew. 2 fistfuls hit the iron griddle with a hiss that echoes off courtyard walls like a cobra in a tantrum. Goat fat foams around the edges, browning onion rings into sweet, sticky halos. Delicious, until the wind shifts, recirculating the vapor under your armpits where it fuses with yesterday's fish scales and last week's beer sweat. A passing neighbor wrinkles his nose, but hunger trumps pride. He offers to trade a nub of garlic for 1 fried scrap. You accept. The garlic will only add attitude to the aroma already colonizing your pores. By late morning, the sun swings high, and the courtyard heats into a giant clay tagine. Your kitchen fire belches oily smoke that rises, hesitates, then presses back down like an invisible hand. You cough goat-scented soot. It tastes vaguely metallic, vaguely sweet, definitely permanent. A droplet of tallow lands on your foot, sealing a dust film into a shiny varnish. Congratulations, you are now half statue, half chef's accident. Inside the house, everyone smells the same, so no one complains. Outside, flies assemble as if summoned by trumpets only insects can hear. They glide over the stew, bounce off your brow, a tempt kamikaze dives into the cooling fat jug. You swipe at them with a palm leaf fan until your arm aches, Then accept that fat attracts wings the way temples attract taxes. Somewhere near the threshold, a cat sits, glazed in the aroma, pupils dilated like a stargazer. You toss it a gristle nub. It devours the offering and licks its whiskers, branding you with gratitude and grease. Evening approaches, bringing a marginally cooler breeze and a fresh duty. The lamp niches need filling. You ladle warmed tallow into little clay saucers, drop twisted linen wicks, and light them. Instantly the room blooms with a buttery glow, and the exact same smell you've been swimming in since dawn. The lamp smoke drifts upward, paints the ceiling with brown petals, and assures that tomorrow's sunrise will greet walls already seasoned like a roasting pan. You catch your reflection in a bronze shard, hair stiff, skin glazed, eyes shining like polished dates. You realize you have become a walking candle, wickless, but ready to ignite at the next careless spark. Part of you wonders how many nights a kitchen hand has actually gone up in flames. Part of you suspects the priests have a prayer for that. Supper, garlic bean stew fortified with caramelized onions and a slick rainbow of goat fat shimmering on top. You sip cautiously. It coats your mouth in a film that tastes like roasted hope and barn floor. Each swallow slides down with the viscosity of warm wax. Full belly, greasy lips, soul hovering between gratitude and mild self-loathing. After dishes, you slog to the riverbank to rinse pots. Water beads on your forearms and floats away in iridescent halos, proof that your skin is now hydrophobic. A crocodile surfaces, sniffs, decides even it has boundaries, and drifts downstream. You laugh. Nothing like being rejected by a reptile that eats carrion for sport. Night deepens. Stars pierce the sky, distant and indifferent. You stretch on your reed mat, realize the bedding now smells like a goat that tried French perfume and failed. You could bathe, but the soap, made from last month's goat fat boiled with ash, shares the same signature scent. A losing battle. You close your eyes. The darkness smells like barnyard nostalgia. Somewhere a minstrel sings of distant lands where olive oil flows like water and people scent their hair with cedar. You roll over, mutter, show-offs, and let the tune fade under the steady pulse in your ears, a pulse echoing the day's rhythm. Render, fry, smoke, repeat. Tomorrow you'll do it again. Because goat fat doesn't just cook food, it cooks time. It seasons memories, tattoos linens, greases the gears of every household between cataracts. Long after your bones bleach beneath the sand, pottery shards will still carry microscopic traces of this day's smoke, and some future scholar will sniff them and declare, "Ah, yes, domestic activity." They'll never know you spent 18 hours wearing the smell like a second slippery skin. Modern folk complain about burnt microwave popcorn. You'd trade goats for that problem. Their scented candles promise Egyptian musk. If only they knew the original recipe. 1 part river dust, 2 parts fear of famine, 7 parts goat fat rendered at dawn. You pull the blanket over your head, pointless, it's already infused, and breathe deep. It smells like survival, like calories, like tomorrow's breakfast. It smells disgusting. It smells divine. It smells like home. In ancient Egypt, deodorant is a fantasy, Febreze a heresy, and the fastest way to announce your profession is simply to exist within smelling distance. Twilight settles over the labor camp like a damp cloth on a fevered brow. But tonight, there's a rumor sweeter than the river breeze. Fruit, real fruit. Not barley mash masquerading as sweetness, not cloying beer foam, but honest to Osiris sugar in its original packaging. Your mouth waters, then remembers to be suspicious. Because in ancient Egypt, dessert is a Trojan horse stuffed with wings, worms, and all the quiet ways a stomach can surrender. The haul arrives on a reed sledge, baskets of dates the color of sunburned leather, figs swollen to near bursting, a token handful of pomegranates that look like they've seen better rains. These are temple surplus, payment in kind after the gods consumed their fill, and everyone rushes the pile as if it's gold dust. A foreman shouts order, elbows hiss, baskets tip. Fruit rolls into dirt like dice deciding fates. You snag 3 dates, 1 fig, and a bruised pomegranate before the frenzy swallows the rest. First, the dates. Their skins are wrinkled, but that's normal. Dates are basically raisins with better PR. You split one open with your thumb. The flesh glistens, sticky, smelling of caramel and hot stone. Hidden in the syrupy crater is a pale grub, curled and snoozing like a miniature watchman. Welcome to the free protein bonus round. You flick it away. It lands wriggling in the sand, where a hen darts in and ends its shift. 1 down, 2 more to inspect. Both pass muster. If you ignore the faint fizz, that means fermentation has begun. You pop them into your mouth anyway. Sweet. So sweet your tongue sings. Also gritty. Is that sand or larval jaws still clamped to the pit? You decide not to investigate because bliss lasts exactly 3 chews and you're greedy for it. Next up, the figure. A masterpiece of forbidden softness, purple skin etched with tiny cracks. You tear it in half, expecting a clean velvet interior. Instead, the fruit sags apart, revealing a mess of squirming white threads. Maggots, enjoying their own feast. They writhe in slow motion, painted in fig syrup and their own bravado. Your stomach tightens. But waste is blasphemy when calories are hard to earn. Solution? Fire. You spear the fig half on a splinter of palm, hold it over the cook fire. The larvae twist, pop, blacken. The syrup caramelizes, smells like burnt sugar and hired assassins. When the skin finally chars, you blow on it and bite. Smoky, rich, slightly crunchy, the aftertaste of survival dusted with exoskeleton. Could be worse. The pomegranate you save for last, a ruby promise under bruised rind. Crack it open with a stone. Arils glisten like garnets, but some are pallid, collapsed, already leaking pale mold fuzz. You pick around the casualties, shoveling bright kernels into your mouth until your lips look freshly murdered. Seeds crunch, juice sparks. For a moment you taste something almost modern, tart, clean, alive. Then an off note creeps in, metallic, like licking an old dagger. Mycotoxins? Maybe. Tomorrow's problem. You swallow optimism and adjust your expectations. Around you, other workers conduct their own forensic autopsies. One man shakes a date by his ear, listens for grub rattle the way nobles listen for gold coins. Another peels figs, sighs in relief when only half the cavities move independently. Laughter rises, brittle but real. Dessert may be hostile, but at least it's entertaining. Someone claims a fig worm gives strength. Another bets it gives nightmares. You bet both are right. Later that night, you're assigned to torch duty at the granary gates. The sky is a black bowl pinholed with stars, but inside your gut the fruit mob is staging protests. Dates ferment into bubbles. Figs ferment into foghorns. The pomegranate seeds clack through intestines like dice across limestone. You shift your weight, clench muscles, pray the gods of digestion show mercy. They do not. A belch escapes, thick, sweet, carrying notes of roasted maggot and pomegranate vinegar. The guard beside you steps away, mutters a quick spell against evil winds. Mid-shift, a child runner scampers past, cheeks bulging chipmunk style. He grins, mouth full of date mush, then pauses, eyes widening. He bends, vomits a stream of half-digested larvae onto his sandals, stands panting. You offer a water skin. He rinses, spits, shrugs, and darts off, lighter but undeterred. Tomorrow he'll fight for fruit again. Sweetness is worth the risk. Dawn stains the horizon pink as raw meat. Your belly still gurgles like a brewing vat, yet you smile, teeth sticky with caramel grit, because despite everything, you tasted luxury last night. Somewhere in the palace, nobles nibble honey-soaked pastries baked in copper molds imported from Byblos. Their figs arrive in glazed jars sealed with beeswax, their dates sorted by size, their pomegranates individually wrapped in linen. And still, their kitchens employ tasters, because privilege doesn't grant immunity from hidden worms. Perhaps the gods appreciate irony. Kings fear poison, peasants fear parasites, and both wind up on latrine duty at dawn. Equality through intestinal roulette. You shoulder your spear, watch the river ignite in sunrise, and feel the first abdominal cramp of the day. A monarch's gift in commoner packaging. Back in the huts, breakfast haze rises. Bean stew, beer porridge, the reliable grim flavors that rarely surprise. You eye a lonely date on the table, half shriveled, probably safe. You almost reach for it, then remember last night's opera in your bowels. Instead, you turn away, leaving the fruit for some braver soul. Because in ancient Egypt, dessert isn't a treat, it's a duel. You bite, it bites back. Some days you win, savoring sugar while it lasts. Some days you lose, spending sunrise curled beside a latrine trench, bargaining with deities who never signed up to police figs. One truth remains: sweetness is scarce, rot is patient, and hunger will make you dull every instinct but the one that whispers, "Eat it before someone else does." A grub here, a mold strand there, cost of admission to momentary bliss. You wipe pomegranate stains from your chin, straighten your spine, and march toward the quarry, carrying both shovel and the faint perfume of fermented dates. Tomorrow, when you complain about gritty bread or sour beer, remember the fig that squirmed, taste its phantom sugar in the back of your throat, and decide once again whether the risk of dessert is worth repeating. Spoiler, it is. It always is, because in a land where the sun steals sweat, grain owns teeth, and gods steal grain, even rotten fruit can taste like rebellion wrapped in honey. The festival of Opet has arrived, and Thebes is humming like a beehive dunked in honey and set on fire. Trumpets bray, priests glide in linen so white it mocks the desert glare, and you, sweaty, sand-coated you, have somehow landed a coveted spot on the temple's volunteer service team. Translation: you'll spend the next 2 days carrying, scrubbing, and smiling while the city gorges itself on food meant to impress immortals. You line up at dawn outside Karnak's western gate, surrounded by barrel-chested butchers, cake bakers dusted head to toe in flour, and perfumers whose robes exhale frankincense every time they blink. A high priest steps out, arms wide, voice booming like distant thunder. "Today we feed the gods, and the gods feed us." The crowd cheers. Your stomach, empty since yesterday's maggot-fizzed dessert, joins the chorus with an audible howl. The first assignment is deceptively glorious. Escort the sacred stews. 2 bronze cauldrons, each big enough to drown an ox, bubble with a mix of Nile perch, river herbs, and enough garlic to fumigate an army of demons. The broth smells spectacular, peppery, rich, shot through with coriander and the tang of fermented date wine. Unfortunately, you're not here to taste. You hoist a carrying pole with 3 other volunteers and wobble through a corridor of lotus-carved columns, trying not to imagine how much fish oil is splashing onto your already goat-fat lacquered tunic. Inside the hypostyle hall, priests ladle stew into gold-rimmed bowls and set them before colossal statues. They chant long vowels that drip like molasses, inviting the gods to dig in. You stand nearby, dizzy from steam and incense, waiting. 10 slow minutes later, a gong strikes. Divinity has absorbed the essence. The bowls come back, still heaped, still steaming, but now officially God-touched. That means only temple personnel of rank may eat the top layer, leaving the dregs for honored helpers. You try to calculate your ranking, somewhere between scrub boy and floor tile. A scribe waves you closer, hands over a shallow dish filled with leftover stew. Finally, a taste. You scoop a chunk of fish, still flaky, still fragrant, and blow on it. Just before you bite, the scribe murmurs, "Mind the bones. The last helper choked, and we're short on embalming salt." Comforting, you chew anyway. For 3 glorious seconds, the world narrows to ginger-tinged broth and buttery flesh. 4th second, a hair-thin bone wedges between your molars. 5th, another bone pricks your throat. You swallow, eyes watering, and pretend gratitude. Next course arrives, honey-laced goose thighs, roasted over acacia embers until the skin gleams like lacquered cedar. Priests carve generous slices for nobles, slivers for scribes, and crumb-sized bits for workers. You catch a shard no bigger than your thumbnail, pop it in, feel goose fat melt across your tongue, then realize the meat beneath is still a shade pinker than health prefers. A sweet, sour burp escapes. You convince yourself that's just the flavor of divine favor. Between courses, you haul amphorae of wine from Luxor's cellars, liquid garnet scented with lotus blossom. Cups swirl across marble like miniature crimson whirlpools, spilling on sandals, splashing over altar steps. You're handed the dregs in a chipped clay mug. It tastes, miracle of miracles, clean, bright, alive, also strong. By cup 3, your legs forget yesterday's quarry bruises, and the giant statues seem slightly less judgmental. Yet the feast has only begun. Platters of barbel carp stuffed with cumin-soaked figs parade past, followed by spit-roasted antelope draped in pomegranate glaze, then cakes of honey-spiced barley crowned with whole almonds, imported, worth more than your yearly wage. Each dish circles the shrine, collects official blessing, and re-enters the mortal realm one tier lower on the hierarchy ladder. By the time it reaches you, it's half warm, half picked, half safe. You don't hesitate. Hunger outruns caution like a chariot outruns sandals. Afternoon sun razors through clear-story slits, baking the hall into an oven perfumed with equal parts glory and spoilage. The combination of sweet wine fumes, greasy goose vapor, and simmering fish stock turns the air syrup thick. Sweat beads on your forearms. Tiny droplets of fat still clinging from Chapter 8 melt anew, creating a fresh glaze. You realize you smell like someone deep-fried an orchard inside a fish market. That's when the cramps start. A quiet gurgling at first, then an audible knot twisting just below your navel, as if a tiny serpent decided to practice sailor's knots on your intestines. You clench, breathe, smile. No pain, no festival. But the serpent tugs again, harder. Fireworks of nausea bloom behind your eyes. You glance around. Other helpers lean on walls, faces pale. One drops to a knee, retches behind a column decorated with delicate images of lotus blossoms. Irony, painted in technicolor. The priests remain serene, protected perhaps by years of incremental poison tolerance and the blissful ignorance of never eating leftovers. Nobles have discreetly retreated to side chambers, probably sipping ginger to settle their velvet-lined stomachs. You have work till dusk. An overseer claps hands. Final procession. Statues of Amun and Mut will be carried down the avenue of sphinxes to Luxor, accompanied by musicians, dancers, and, you guessed it, more food offerings balanced on your aching shoulders. You heft a tray of barley cakes, woozy. The sun outside slams into you like a mallet. Drummers pound, sistrums shake, the crowd roars as the god's bark glides by. Your vision swims, barley cakes blur. You attempt a shout of acclamation, but instead belch a cloud of fish wine vapor that would kill crops if aimed properly. Halfway to Luxor, your knees buckle. A guard grabs the tray before it hits sand. You hit sand anyway. Dancers swerve around you, still smiling, still clanging bronze castanets. You crawl to a curb, body clenched in rebellion. Somewhere behind, the procession marches on, unfazed by one collapsing stomach in 1,000. Divine economy. Plenty more peasants where you came from. Night finally cools the stones. You lie outside a mud brick clinic, sipping diluted beer while an apprentice healer fans away flies. Diagnosis? Feast sickness, a polite term for mixing half-cooked goose, overripe figs, and day-old fish stew in a furnace that humans call a body. Prescription? Rest, charcoal, and, ironically, plain barley bread to soak up the chaos. The same gritty loaf that wrecked your teeth now poses as savior. You chew obediently, wincing at quartz crunch, and watch torches bob along the avenue as priests return, triumphant. The gods have eaten, the city has celebrated, and somewhere a scribe inscribes the festival's success in perfect hieroglyphs, omitting the part where volunteers vomited behind lotus pillars. History loves selective memory. Tomorrow you'll wake bruised, dehydrated, teeth sanded thinner, but alive. You'll drag yourself to the work line, trading stories with fellow survivors. Who puked first? Whose goose piece was still twitching? Did anyone actually see Amun eat? You'll laugh because laughing hurts less than remembering the cramps. And you'll do it again next year if they ask. Because for those few luminous bites, you tasted what gods were served, even if it tried to kill you. In a world where hunger is constant and luxury is lethal, that brief communion is worth the agony. In ancient Egypt, eating like a god is easy. Living afterward is the hard part. Divinity may banquet in gold, but mortality cleans the dishes and pays the doctor's bill in broken teeth and sleepless nights. It starts with a smell, or rather, the absence of one. No garlic haze rolling from the cookpots at dawn, no onion tang pricking eyes in the lunch queue, just bland steam hissing out of bean sludge like a sigh that's already given up. You taste the air, taste nothing, and suddenly realize your day will be as flat as old papyrus. You're a tomb builder at Deir el Medina, the village of the artisans, which sounds glamorous until you remember a royal tomb is basically the world's most decorative bunker. The foreman's whistle cracks through the chill morning. "To the valley, you loafers!" Normally, you'd answer with a burp perfumed by last night's garlic stew, every worker's cologne. Today, your breath is barren. Your stomach mutters a question your brain refuses to translate, because the rations clerk never showed, because the supply boat from Thebes, heavy with grain, beer, and most critically, sacks of onions and garlic, never docked. And because without those fist-sized bulbs, you're not just flavor-starved, you're chemically naked. Onions keep scurvy at bay, clear parasites, camouflage the funk of goat fat, and grant courage to men who carve eternity out of limestone. No bulb, no backbone. Still, you hike into the Valley of the Kings, tools slapping thighs, dust curling around ankles like apathetic cobras. The cliff face looms, pocked with half-finished doorways to afterlives richer than your entire village. You swing pick to plaster, plaster to rubble, rubble to basket. The rhythm is off. Muscles creak, eyes sting not from onion fumes but from the absence of them. By noon, your bean porridge tastes like boiled apologies. A mason mutters, "This is food for ghosts." Another replies, "Even ghosts would season with sand." When the sun tiptoes behind the ridge, the foreman checks his tally board and frowns. Output is down. Spirits are lower. He promises the ration boat will arrive tomorrow. You don't believe him. Priests skim supplies, scribes miscount on purpose, palace festivals devour everything savory. You trudge home, tongue coated in boredom, gums itching for that sweet onion burn. Dawn number 2, still no boat. Dawn number 3, only rumors. On day number 4, the village elders call a courtyard meeting. Someone unrolls a papyrus list of missing staples: 231 sacks of grain, 53 jars of beer, 21 bundles of dried fish, 8 sacks of onions, 5 of garlic. The numbers land like hammer blows, but the crowd only growls at 2 of them. You raise a fistful of stale bread, your breakfast, and shout, "What's a man without onions? A corpse waiting to dry." Cheers erupt. Even the scribes, usually aloof, nod. Their inkpots reek of onion skin they soak to soften hides. That afternoon, work stops. Picks drop. You march, an exodus of 120 sunburned artisans, down the valley path toward Ramses III's mortuary temple. Guards gape. No one sees a strike coming from the men trusted with Pharaoh's eternal decor. Drums? Number you pound on your own lunch bowls for percussion. The sound echoes off sandstone like thunder brewed in an empty stomach. Temple officials block the gate, gold collars flashing indignation. You plant yourself in the shade of a sycamore sacred to Hathor and refuse to budge. Word spreads. The tomb builders won't work. They demand onions. Some officials laugh until they remember that every unfinished wall in the royal tomb is a public embarrassment waiting to be discovered by foreign merchants and nosy priests. Pharaoh's afterlife schedule is at risk, and nothing panics bureaucracy like a god-king stuck in transit. By sunset, priests bring a peace offering, a single basket of onions, another of garlic, plus a clay jar of beer sweetened with date honey. You count heads, count bulbs, do math no overseer expected you could do? Not enough, you declare. The crowd agrees, arms crossed, iron chisels tapping stone like rattlesnakes ready to strike. Night falls. You camp at the temple forecourt, cooking rice in borrowed pots and tossing in exactly 0 onions, just to make your point. Torches flicker on colonnades. Colossal statues cast long frowns across the stone floor. Somewhere inside, scribes furiously recalculate project deadlines. You sip warm beer, taste only vengeance. Dawn number 5, capitulation. 20 donkey carts rattle in, piled high with bulging reed sacks. The air shifts the moment a cart is slid open. Sulfur-sweet, eye-watering, life-affirming. The crowd inhales as one organism, a collective lung re-inflating. Priests announce new quotas, back pay in bulbs, and a written promise carved on a stela. Henceforth, rations shall arrive on the first day of every lunar quarter, lest the artisans withdraw their hands. You cheer, a sound part victory cry, part caffeinated exhale. You pop a raw clove between teeth. Fire spreads across tongue, climbs nasal passages, lights your brain with jolts of clarity. Someone starts a song about the day onions defeated Pharaoh, and the chorus sticks like resin. Back at the tomb, the rock face seems softer, tools lighter. Garlic sweat perfumes the tunnels once more. You carve hieroglyphs depicting lotus flowers, duck boats, the king smiting enemies, ordinary propaganda. Yet you hide a tiny onion bulb in the corner of one scene, half smiling as you etch. Future archaeologists will puzzle over it. You grin at the prank. That night, village fires sparkle like fallen stars. Onions sizzle in goat fat, garlic marries bean paste. Aroma winds through alleys like a protective spell. Children chase each other with breath so powerful it could embalm a stray cat. You lean against a mud wall, full belly pressing stone-sanded ribs, and consider the day's miracle. The empire didn't topple from foreign invasion or plague. It nearly collapsed because common laborers missed their seasoning. Modern diners whine when a cafe forgets extra onions on a burger. You once threatened royal deadlines for a single bulb. Let them taste blandness for 4 sunsets and see how quickly civilization frays. In ancient Egypt, currency wore many shapes. Copper rings, grain, beer, all well and good. But the true economy was measured in layers of pungent skin that could make a god weep and a worker fight. Miss a payment, lose a pyramid. Pay up, and eternity gets its paint job on schedule. Tomorrow brings more sand, more rock, more sweat. But your breath will carry the power of 1,000 pyramids, and every swing of your pick will taste faintly of sulfur and triumph. You sit alone on a mud brick rooftop, knees up, back against a pot that once held barley, but now hosts a single, defiant onion shoot. The night sky above Thebes is velvet heavy, punctured by jealous stars. Down in the alleys, the hiss of simmering bean pots drifts like a lullaby, mingling with soft snores, an occasional goat bleat, the sigh of a Nile breeze too tired to stir dust. For the first time in weeks, your stomach is quiet. Not full, never truly full, but calm enough to let your mind roam. And roam it does, across the 12 courses of cuisine you've survived. You replay them like a banquet of hard-won memories, each dish a parable carved in your gut, the bread that ground your teeth into gravel, the beer that frothed and burped you awake, the bean stew that glued men together in silent brotherhood, the royal roast that glittered like ambrosia but hid bacterial daggers, the fish that surrendered to flies faster than to salt, the temple granaries where gods dined on surplus while villages chewed air, the milk that curdled into daredevil cheese. The day goat fat perfumed every pore you owned, The figs that writhed, sweeter than sin, ruder than honesty. The feast that crowned you with cramps worthy of Pharaoh. The rebellion that proved onions outrank kings. Each chapter tasted different, but they all dissolved in the same crucible. Your body, fragile yet stubborn, a clay jar patched with faith. And as the moon slides west, you realize the lessons aren't just written on your tongue, they're etched into the pyramid-shaped muscle of your heart. It tutors without mercy or syllabus. It teaches you that a grain of emmer can outweigh a golden amulet, that sweetness can make you ignore squirming larvae, that risk is simply a condiment when the alternative is emptiness. Hunger shrinks the world to a bowl and a hope, yet it also inflates senses. You can smell a sliced onion 2 streets away, hear beer hiss inside a sealed jar, feel the texture of sand in bread like Braille spelling out live. Every bite is a school bell rung by your own ribs. From palace hall to temple storehouse, you watched how food draws borders sharper than any spear line. Gods feast first, priests second, nobles somewhere in the creamy middle, everyone else content with scorched crumbs. But class isn't static stone. Today a taster dies so a king may chew. Tomorrow a strike of stink-breath artisans halts the afterlife's grand opening. One missing onion can tilt hierarchies, remind the powerful that pyramids rise only if bellies below receive their mortar of calories. Class, you've learned, is fragile, built from appetite and fear in equal measure. It's easy to thank the gods when the platter overflows with honeyed goose. Harder, yet more urgent, when your dinner swims with maggots or your cup tastes like barnyard. Gratitude here is not polite, it is pragmatic, armor for the spirit. You learn to nod at a grub for the protein, salute a pebble in bread because at least it means the loaf exists. Some nights, gratitude feels like surrender. Other nights, it is rebellion. A laugh hurled at the universe because you are still upright, still chewing, still able to groan about it. You've seen it. A toothless elder soaking hardened crusts in beer for the child who lost his fig to a faster hand. A cook slipping an extra onion slice into a guard's stew because she spotted worry in his shoulders. Workers trading rib bones like lucky charms after a festival sickness leveled them all. Misery portioned equally becomes medicine. In Egypt, empathy is measured not in words, but in morsels. Passed palm to palm, steaming, imperfect, enough. One day the bread will soften, the beer will chill, the fish will keep. Future generations, those soft, pampered dreamers, will speak of ancient hardships, the way scribes speak of myths. Let them. That's the duty of time. But your scars will linger in stories, in the way you season jokes with garlic, in the reflex that makes you sniff milk twice, in the reverence you hold for a simple onion bulb. Memory, like beer mash, bubbles unseen until a new thirst arrives. Lying on this roof, you picture someone centuries ahead complaining that their coffee is lukewarm, their Wi-Fi sluggish, their pillow insufficiently cloud-like. You feel no anger, only an odd tenderness, because you too complained when the barley stones chipped your teeth. Perspective doesn't erase discomfort. It stretches it thin, lets light through. It reminds you that survival once hinged on catching a fly before it laid eggs, or stirring a pot before goat fat scorched, or marching for onions because class lines dissolve when flavor disappears. You shift, bones creaking like boat planks, and pull the onion pot closer. Its green shoot glows in moonlight, a tiny torch against the dark. Tomorrow you'll transplant it near the doorway, let it drink Nile silt, hope it multiplies. Not wealth, not power, but roots and layers. A living reminder that history's sharpest lessons arrive wrapped in papery skins. Below, the camp quiets. A baby coughs, a donkey stamps, somewhere a drummer taps a sleepy heartbeat on a water jar. You lift your face to the sky one last time. Orion hunts across the same canvas pharaohs claimed, but he cares little for crowns. Up there, everything is distance and cold fire. Down here, everything is warmth and the relentless question, what will we eat? You've answered it 12 ways, each messy, each miraculous. You inhale notes of bean smoke, river mud, lingering garlic, and exhale gratitude so tangible it fogs in the cool air. Not a hymn, not a complaint, just a simple breath that says, I was hungry, and the past fed me, cruelly, generously, completely. And in that admission lies the quiet joy of being modern, of tasting softness where your ancestors tasted grit. Tomorrow you will groan about work, curse sand and sandals, maybe scowl at a slightly sour beer. But tonight you vow a small, stubborn pledge. To remember the gravel bread when your toast is too dark, to remember the fig worms when your fruit is overpriced, to remember the onion strike whenever you feel powerless. Gratitude, once flexed, does not forget its own strength. You tap the clay pot, stand, and descend the ladder. Behind you, the onion's green blade quivers in the breeze, alive, defiant, absurdly hopeful, just like you.